Magic is the bloodstream of the universe. Forget all you know or think you know. All that you require is your intuition. This was a quote by the High Aldwin in Willow. It was a fun fantasy movie made in the late 80s by Ron Howard. Let me ask you something. Have you ever talked on a phone with your friend or a loved one and had the strange sense that something was off? Have you ever been given a choice or opportunity and it sounds attractive, but your gut and inner voice is pulling a Star Wars and saying, I got a bad feeling about this? How often have you experienced fleeting moments of intuition that pointed you to one direction, but instead you went with another and realized in hindsight you should have listened to your own intuition in the first place? I want to share a quote by Albert Einstein. He said, I believe in intuitions and inspirations. I sometimes feel that I am right. I do not know that I am. In today's episode, we have tons to cover as we dive into the world of intuition. The strength of your intuition is correlated to how well your IA is operating. What is IA, or internal alternator? So we'll unpack that, and I'll share some key ingredients on how to activate and strengthen your intuition. Do you want to make better intuitive decisions in your life? You'll want to listen in. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast. I am your host, Benjamin Ye. This show is about giving you the perspectives and framework on how to gain clarity and unlock your hidden breakthroughs. It's time for you to live an extraordinary life that you designed. Let's get to work. Welcome back to Boom Vision, folks. I am so excited to share today's topic, intuition. As Marty McFly would say in Back to the Future, this is heavy, Doc, because you know what? This is heavy because there's tons to unpack here. As a quick refresh, intuition is one of 3 core pillars in building a strong, powerful inner mindset. Those 3 core pillars are imagination, voice, and intuition. Now, for those of you that might be new to Boom Vision, you might be asking yourself, why imagination, voice, and intuition? What are these 3 things that are core pillars of building a strong mindset? The reason why these 3 things are so important is because your imagination is what enables your mind to see. Your voice or inner voice is what your mind hears. And your intuition is what your soul wants you to feel. And so, what is the benefit of being able to use your intuition? Why is intuition important in your life? The textbook definition of intuition is ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. I believe this is true, but I like to give this definition and meaning some more context. I want to share what my beautiful friend Sabrina Boland, who's a soul alignment coach, has shared with me, which is that intuition is beyond thought, not before thought. Let me say that again. Intuition is beyond thought, not before thought. If you think about it, the textbook definition of intuition, that could be interpreted a lot of different ways depending on the context. The ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning is saying that your intuition is giving you a signal before your conscious mind or thoughts come into play. But if you interpret this as before thought, that could be your instincts kicking in, right? As human beings, we have survival instincts, or also known as fight or flight. That's different from intuition. But if you interpret it as beyond thought, that's coming from a higher source. That's coming from a gut feeling that's being shared with you. How many times in your life have you said to yourself after the fact, man, I wish I'd followed my gut feeling because that was totally the right call, right? I have to admit, this happens to me more often than I can count, but you know what? You can tell yourself that you're learning from those decisions, but yet, do you learn to trust your intuition? So the question is, how do we start cultivating our sense of feeling and confidence to ultimately activate and strengthen our intuition. Now, before I dive into the how, let me first explain how energy works throughout our body, because it's all interconnected. There's a quote I want to share. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. This quote came from Albert Einstein, and what's fascinating about this is that emotional energy works the same way. Emotion is energy in motion. What we feel, what we think, the state of mind that we're in carries different energies with it. In this context, once your emotional energy is activated, emotional energy can only change from one form to another. Let me say that again. Once your emotional energy is activated, emotional energy can only change from one form to another. If you choose to suppress your emotional energy, meaning if you hold on to that emotion or you bottle up your emotions, rather than allowing your emotions to flow in its natural state, one of three things happen. That emotional energy is transferred to either one, a different part of your conscious mind or your state of mind. Two, a different part of your SOS, your subconscious operating system. Or three, a different part of your physical body. So let me give you some examples. The first one, right? If it gets parked into your conscious mind or state of mind, have you ever experienced being randomly cut off by a car as you're going away to work when you're stuck in morning traffic? And then because you got cut off, you're all of a sudden in this agitated state of mind. Have you ever carried that state of mind, that impatient or agitated state, as you're going throughout work? As you go into work and go into your office before you start taking your first meetings, are you still in the agitated state? Or another example is, have you ever been chewed out by your boss at work and you carried that pent-up frustration or anger with you at home to your family and you unintentionally lashed out to your partner or kids? I mean, these are examples of when, if you did not let that emotional energy just flow and you stored it or you suppressed it, it goes to a different part of your conscious mind, your state of mind, and it gets parked there. And that can impact you throughout the day. Or two, SOS, your subconscious operating system. An example is, in your childhood, as you're growing up, have you ever experienced being constantly compared to either your sibling or your friends at school? Either has your parents or relatives ever said, why can't you be more like your brother or your sister, or just fill in the blank to whoever they're comparing you to? And being told that, has it made you feel like you're less loved because you lacked something? And if it did you hold on to that emotional state and attached that with the experience of hearing those words? Why can't you be more like blank? That could be a profound impact to your inner voice or your SOS on what you say to yourself, which can then also impact your self-confidence and self-love. And so three, different part of your physical body. An example, for all of your fellow yogis out there, you'll get what I'm coming from with this. There's a yoga pose called the pigeon pose. This pose can be a little bit challenging because it's meant to open up your hip to increase the energy flow in that area. Okay? This pose is really interesting because it activates your second chakra, your sacral chakra, which is known as the emotional bank of the human body. Why I'm explaining this yoga pose is that there are times when I'm in a yoga class that some folks get really emotional when they're doing this pose. They need to release those emotions either by loudly double exhaling to breathe through that pose. And sometimes people cry because there's just so much pent-up emotion stored in their hips. So to recap, there's three places where your emotional energy is stored if you hold on to it. It's either your conscious mind, your SOS, subconscious operating system, or your physical body. Now, the main takeaway from this is that, going back to Albert Einstein's quote, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. emotional energy works the same way. If you do not let natural flow through your body of that emotional energy, if you're holding on to that emotional energy or you're suppressing it, it can be really difficult for your IA, your internal alternator, to work effectively. So this leads into what is IA, internal alternator. So let me first give you an example. An alternator in a car is the type of electric generator used in modern automobiles to charge the battery and to power the electrical system when the engine is running. In other words, the alternator is a very important piece of machinery in the car because it's what transforms mechanical energy into electric energy that powers all the different features within the car. Now, I'll give you an example. If you ever left a light inside your car accidentally on overnight, and when you came back to try to start your car barely starts. I remember the first year when I first got my license and I started driving, I made this mistake of leaving the light inside the car on, right? And when it was really hard to get this car started, and I was telling my parents this, my parents would always tell me, just take the car out and just drive it around for 15 minutes, right? It'll charge a car battery. Now, I didn't understand the actual mechanics of why that is, but essentially it's the alternator in the car that makes that work. The alternator in your car is an important piece because, like I said, it transforms mechanical energy into electrical energy. And it sends that electrical energy to the motor that then recharges your car battery. Now, what is your internal alternator? Using that car alternator as a metaphor, your internal alternator is an important piece of your body because it converts and transforms your emotional energy in your body. Your internal alternator takes your emotional energy and it generates electric energy throughout your body that can impact your physical body, your conscious mind, and your subconscious mind. How well your internal alternator operates will impact how you recharge or discharge your body's physical and mental energy. One great example of how they can recharge is the Last Dance documentary by ESPN and Netflix. This was a great documentary about Michael Jordan's life and amazing career in basketball. There were multiple times throughout his career where someone would say something or do something where MJ would just take it personally. And when MJ took a particular incident personally, his IA, his internal alternator, converts that emotional energy that would recharge his mental and physical energy. That shift allowed MJ to play at an elevated level and dominate that game. That's an example of how it can recharge. Now, an example of what can discharge your mental and physical energy, let me share with you a personal story that I experienced in middle school. Back in middle school, I think it was in 6th grade, I had this huge crush on this girl, and she was like Miss Popular. And so for the sake of not using real names, I'm just going to call her Mary. And so what happened was that I had this huge crush on Mary, and somehow she found out through other friends. And I remember one day during recess, she came running with her 2 friends, and she gave me this note. And it was folded up in like a heart-shaped note, and with colored pencils, it looks like it was like her handwriting. And basically, the letter said something to the effect of that, "Hey Ben, I heard you like me. Turns out I like you too. Why don't we go on a date this Friday? And we could go to this parlor right down the street." And so you have to understand, since I received that letter from Mary, and I was looking at this, I was like, oh my God, like I actually believed this was real. My heart was pounding and I was like, oh my God, like what's happening here? But I wasn't able to go on a date this Friday. Kids being kids, I told a friend to tell her, hey, I'm not able to make it this Friday, but can we pick another date? Fast forward a couple days after that, what was weird is that, it was end of the school. I was waiting in a parking lot for my mom to pick me up. And a couple of guys came up to me and handed me a note. and they said it was from Mary. But what was kind of weird is that this note was folded up like in a paper airplane. And so I was like, okay. So I opened up the note to read it, and just something seemed off because it had bad handwriting that didn't look like the letter that Mary had gave me. And it said something to the effect of, hey Ben, I heard you like me, I like you too. Why don't we go on a date next week, and etc. etc. But it just looked really weird. I remember vividly, because I had this confused look, when I looked up, I saw a bunch of people around that parking lot pointing at me and laughing at me. And in that moment, I knew something was really wrong here. I mean, why is everyone laughing at me? And it was about a minute later, my mom came to pick me up. I got in a car. Mom, with having her mom intuition, she knew something was wrong. So she asked me, are you okay? And I was trying really hard not to cry in front of her. I'm just like, you know what? I'm fine. Let's just go home. And it wasn't until I got home, I was really confused and hurt. But what I later found out was that Mary, when she initially wrote that letter to me, it was meant to be a joke. Because what was going to happen is that if I had shown up on that date at the parlor, she would have stood me up. And instead, her friends or other people would have walked by and would have essentially laughed me off too. What ended up happening was when more of my classmates found out about that, and particularly this PE class, they decided it'd be funny if they wrote another love letter and saying, would I go on a date next week instead? When I found this out, I could not have felt more alone in my life. I remember taking both of those letters, that paper airplane letter and that heart-shaped letter from Mary, and I remember taking a match, going to the middle of the street, crouching down, and burning those two notes. And as it was burning, I told myself, Ben, I will never let you get hurt like that again. And something happened that day. Something shifted. I basically created this switch where, from an act of just protecting myself, I will emotionally shut off. If I ever sense that there's any emotional danger, I'll just shut it off so I won't feel the pain. When you combine an intense feeling of alone and hurt or negative emotions, you create a powerful imprint in your conscious and subconscious mind. Because of that traumatic experience and the painful emotions I attached around that experience, I consciously and subconsciously altered my IA, my internal alternator. And the results of that is that I inadvertently also blocked my progress to activate and trust my own intuition. What do I mean by this? By internally creating this switch to be able to turn off my emotions, I altered my internal alternator so that I would emotionally shut down when my conscious mind or my ego senses any fear of getting emotionally hurt. But what is fear? Fear is false evidence appearing real. F-E-A-R. Fear is false evidence appearing real. It's the perception and assumption that there's possible emotional dangers ahead. By not allowing myself to let the emotional energy to convert and flow freely through my body and letting it go, by not allowing myself to feel it but letting it go, my conscious mind decided that day to instead hold on and attach that painful emotion I felt that day with what I perceived as a traumatic experience, as an act to protect myself. And if I felt any signs of potentially getting hurt in any kind of relationship, my IA would go, nope, I'm not going down that road again. I'm not going to let you do that. And I would emotionally shut off. Can you relate to this with any past experiences that you might have felt emotional pain? The main takeaway with this story and why I'm sharing this with you is that in hindsight, how I altered my IA to discharge the energy in my body that I would feel by emotionally shutting down. This really hindered my ability to activate and strengthen my intuition. mainly because I was unable to trust my own feelings. I allowed my conscious mind and ego to grab hold and control of my IA in an act of self protection, which also impacts my SOS or my inner voice. Basically, it's saying, hey, Ben, I sense possible emotional pain. Shut down emotionally right now. Okay. And that's what I would do. But can you see, when my internal alternator is not working properly, I am essentially pushing the mute button of my intuition and blocking my ability to see or hear or listen to my soul's GPS. This is why I spend a lot of time to explain how important it is to have awareness of how your IA is operating and to be aware of how your emotional energy is flowing through your body, because you want to create an environment where you can see, listen, or feel what your soul's GPS is guiding you towards. Everyone has intuition. It's whether if you choose to learn how to receive and understand those intuitive signals or not. And so the key ingredients to activate and strengthen your intuition is a combination of two things. One, it's the awareness of how well your internal alternator, your IA, is working. Is it flowing freely, or do you hold on and suppress your emotional energy? And two, calming your mind, your state of mind, to more easily receive the subtle signals of your beyond GPS, your soul's GPS. What do I mean by receiving? Like I said, everyone has intuition, but how their intuition sends subtle signals is different. Another perspective of how you can understand your own intuition is that it acts both like a blind spot detection and your soul's GPS that's beyond thought, or what I call beyond GPS. If you've ever driven a car that has a blind spot detection system, what happens is that when your system is activated, any obstacle that's getting close in proximity to your vehicle, your system will send you signals. It'll start beeping. The closer you get to the obstacle, or vice versa, the closer the obstacles are getting to your vehicle, the faster the beeping sounds. If your intuition or your blind spot detection is sending you signals to your mind and body, but if you have music turned up so loud in a car that it's drowning that beeping signal, guess what? It'll be harder for you to hear your blind spot detections, right? Are you calming your mind to be able to hear your blind spot detection signals more easily? Now, the other way of saying it is beyond GPS. The same thing could be said about your soul's GPS. Now, this is where you really have to pay attention to how your soul's GPS, your intuition, is communicating with you. It could be a visual, it could be auditory, it could be feeling. For some folks, you might see a flash of vision that pops in your mind. For others, you might hear a voice that sounds different from your own inner voice. This tone is different. Your intuitive voice isn't charged with emotion. It's usually very subtle and it's neutral in tone. And the third way is that your intuition is asking you to connect and feel what your heart wants. When I saw that vision of my family playing in the front yard, but I wasn't feeling the same level of happiness as I was seeing it in my vision, that was my intuition telling me that what I felt did not match what I was seeing. And so, what are the action steps you can take to strengthen your intuitions? There are 3 things you can do to start tuning in and cultivating your intuition. Your first one is C, calming. Your state of mind needs to be calm. It is much easier to tune into the frequency of your intuition when your wind tunnel is turned off. So, what exercises can you do to calm your inner state of mind? There's breathing exercises, there's meditation. Do you do yoga? Do you like to run? Find a way to calm your mind so that you can turn off your wind tunnel, like I mentioned in the second episode. 2, awareness. A for awareness. Bring awareness to how effective your internal alternator is converting your emotional energy that flows through your body. Are you aware of letting your feelings flow, or do you hold and suppress your emotional energy? Is your current IA, your internal alternator, efficiently or inefficiently converting your emotional energy? Do you recharge or discharge your energy throughout your body? Are there negative emotional energy that you hold on to that is no longer helpful to you and serving you going forward? Perhaps you could do some simple stretches or the pigeon pose I was saying to release any emotional energy that's stored up in your hips or your emotional bank. And 3, L, language, asking the right questions. There's a quote by Walt Whitman, "Be curious, not judgmental." This was also referenced in a Ted Lasso episode where there's a dart scene. If you look up that on YouTube, it is a great scene. And so ask yourself the right questions. Rather than asking, should I take this opportunity or should I go this direction? I would like you to use your imagination and imagine yourself talking to your highest self. And rephrase your question to, is this opportunity the highest and best for me at this moment? Or, will taking this direction be helpful in my life at this moment? And just sit with that question. Just take a moment to sit still with that question and see what unfolds. You might see a vision, you might hear a voice that's different from your inner voice, or your body might be starting to feel a certain sensation. Just pay attention and write them down in your journal. And if you do sit with your question and nothing comes up, don't stress about it. Just go about your day. Your intuition might signal to you in a different moment. The key is to let your mind be calm so that you're lowering your music in your car, so to speak, so that makes it easier for you to pick up on your intuitive signals. So for the next 3 days, do your best in making time to take these action steps. Learning how to activate your intuition takes practice and patience. If it doesn't come naturally in the beginning, please don't stress about it. You have to give yourself the space to be open and curious. All that I ask is that you don't give up. Some final thoughts for this episode. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. This is a quote by Albert Einstein. Folks, I would love for you to cultivate your intuition. This is such a powerful gift that can serve you well if you practice and strengthen with a calm and open mind. And so just like what Walt Whitman said, be curious, not judgmental. Allow yourself to start trusting your intuition. But to do so, you have to be curious. If your inner voice has old pre-programmed SOS that's speaking more from a judgmental tone, just stop it. Give yourself the space to be curious, not judgmental. Quiet that white noise so that you can allow your intuition signals to come through. Your intuition, where it shares images or voice, does not come with an emotional or judgmental tone. It usually is very subtle hints, so you've got to turn off your wind tunnel to allow that message to come through. Your intuition is a powerful ability to nurture if you give yourself the space to be curious and ask different questions. If today's episode on intuition resonates with you, I'd love to hear, I'd love to know. Please share your experiences and thoughts on what breakthroughs you've experienced in going through the CAL method. How has your intuition signaled and come through to you? Can you identify how your internal alternator has operated and served you? I would really appreciate it if you leave a comment or review so I know how this has impacted your life. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself, be in the light, be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjaminYeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe and I'll catch you next time.